to this session on promoting local and national actors' leadership in cluster coordination through co-coordination approaches. My name is Joyce Mutiso. I'm the Deputy Global Coordinator for the Child Protection Area of Responsibility, and I'm here on behalf of colleagues from the Child Protection Area of Responsibility, the GBV Area of Responsibility, the Global Nutrition Cluster, the Global Education Cluster, as well as the Water, Sanitation, and Hygiene Cluster. And we are very happy to be hosting so many of you from different parts of the world. And thank you for joining us. We'll give 1 more minute for people to join. But in the meantime, just to let you know that we do have interpretation available. So please click on the options of on your settings on Zoom and select which channel you would like to listen into. We have Spanish, we have French, and we have Arabic. And the main session will be running in English. So as we wait for other people to join, we'll let you choose your channel, language channel. You can also introduce yourself on the chat. We are recording the session for purposes of dissemination. So just alerting everybody to be aware that we'll be recording the session. I'll give 1 more minute before we continue so that people join. Thank you. Okay, so we'll start the session. Maybe we'll start by sharing with you the agenda for this session. We have just under 1.5 hours for today's session. So as we mentioned, this session is looking at promoting the participation of or the leadership of national and local actors in cluster coordination through co-coordination approaches. Today we will have the head of Gold Prime Organization in Nigeria, Christopher Chinedumwije, give us the opening remarks. Then we are very happy to have with us Marina Skuric, who is the Chief of the System-Wide Approaches and Practices at OCHA at the global level, who will give us a global overview of co-coordination by local and national actors in various humanitarian coordination groups. We will then have a very interesting video from South Sudan giving us the experience of co-coordination within the education cluster. And then we will have an interactive session on the panel discussion looking at co-coordination, listening to the experiences of different actors in different clusters and AoRs on co-coordination. And we are very happy to have our colleagues from different contexts here. We will introduce them when the session comes up. And then we will also have an opportunity to discuss and ask some questions. We would love to hear from you on your experiences, to hear your questions that you may have around localization and how we can enhance the leadership of national and local actors. And then we are very grateful for Gloria Soma, who is the Executive Director of Titi Foundation in South Sudan, who will be providing us with closing remarks and also sharing a few tips from her side. So this will be our agenda to start with. And then let's hear now from Chris, Dr. Chris, who is the head of Gold Prime Organization in Nigeria, for the opening remarks. Chris, over to you.
Thank you so much, Joyce. Thank you so much, colleagues. Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for welcome to this Global Cluster Localization webinar. It's a pleasure to have such a diverse and esteemed group gathered here today to delve into the vital topics of localization within global clusters. Scaling to new humanitarian crisis context requires more than just responding to emergencies. It demands a deep understanding of the nuances and intricacies of local cultures, preferences, and regulations. Today, we have the opportunity to engage in meaningful dialogue and exchange knowledge on how organizations can effectively localize their approaches and partnerships, ensuring they resonate with local audiences while we also navigate policy challenges that often become bottlenecks to achieving the localization grand bargain at the country level. Moreover, in addition to exploring localization within global context, we will also examine its profound implications in the realm of humanitarian response as we witness a shift towards empowering local actors in various contexts across nations of concern. It becomes increasingly evident that embracing localization not only enhances the sustainability of response efforts, but also ensures greater value with local communities. Organizations can tap into invaluable expertise, resources, and cultural insights, ultimately leading to more effective and impactful humanitarian intervention worldwide. Localization promises to be the lifeline amidst a world bedeviled by emergencies and protracted conflict. It serves as a beacon of hope, enabling organizations to navigate the complexities of crisis situation with agility and efficacy. Today, we have the opportunity to explore how localization strategies can serve as the cornerstone of resilience, offering a lifeline to communities in need and empowering them to thrive amidst adversity. As I conclude, let's remember that better humanity is possible for conflict-affected populations worldwide via localized approaches. Together, let's continue to strive for progress and impact in our global endeavors. I encourage us all to stay inspired and committed to making a difference and bringing the localization dream to reality worldwide. Thank you so much for joining us as we embark on this very beautiful and exciting journey together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chris, for speaking about the importance of localization, particularly in the challenging context that we are all working in, reminding us of the impact that localization can have towards sustainability and addressing some of the longer-term issues that we see affecting populations in humanitarian crisis. So thank you very much. We are now going to move on to the next session, which is hearing from Marina Skuric, who is the head of system-wide approaches and practices at UN OCHA. Before Marina comes in, I just want to welcome everybody who has joined us on this session to let you know that we are recording the session for dissemination purposes and to let you know that we do also have interpretation available in English, in Arabic, French, and Spanish, and the session will be run in English. For all the speakers now and during the Q&A, please speak clearly and surely so that the interpreters have time to hear you and to interpret and pass across the message. Thank you very much for your understanding. Marina, you're very welcome. We are very pleased to hear from you and to have you with us today. I would like to hear from you about the global overview on co-coordination from the various cluster coordination groups. Over to you, Marina, for your inputs on today's session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joyce. So let me first, in the spirit of localization, try to say this in 4 languages: bienvenidas and bienvenidos. Ahlan wa sahlan, bienvenue à tous et à toutes, and welcome to all. And hopefully I haven't mangled anything. So it's a real pleasure to speak today. And I say this with all humility because, of course, localization is on everyone's lips, and it's an incredibly important topic. And what I will speak about very briefly is progress or known progress that's been achieved over the past few years. So I'm going to start off and kick off the discussion with a few global figures to show where we think there has been progress and where we think progress is lacking. And hopefully this will also open it up to other speakers when we will listen to their examples. First of all, let me first explain the definition. So these figures relate to local and national actors. And by that, we use, when we use this terminology, we refer to the IC guidance on what constitutes a local and national actor. And just to remind everyone, it actually means, it includes a number of large groups. One is, first of all, local and national humanitarian actors, NGOs, and that would include a whole variety of either national societies of the Red Cross and the Red Crescent, human rights groups, women rights organizations, faith-based, community-based organizations, a whole range that sort of falls under that big heading. The second group that is part of this categorization is also local and national authorities. And then the third and last group, which is according to the definition, is also actors who are not perhaps considered as classically as humanitarian, so local private sector, but also sometimes development-focused groups, which actually may be involved in humanitarian action. So the IC guidance is very clear. All these groups, actually, when we talk about LNAs, we talk about these groups. Now, the figures I'm going to show you relates to the overall group and not necessarily to subcategories. We can always go into additional analysis, but for the sake of brevity, I'm going to focus on the sort of the global groupation. So first we look at two aspects. And one is participation and representation in coordination, and the other one is leadership. And in terms of participation and representation, I'm not going to read through every one of these, but essentially it shows some modest progress that has been made over the last, we're looking at a range of 3 years. And the figures date to 2022, but actually collected in 2023. And then in 6 months' time, we'll have new figures. But it shows that there has been some steady progress on some aspects and not so much in others. So humanitarian country teams as the key strategic decision-making at country level on humanitarian issues shows some modest progress over the last year, so from 9 to 10%. Then we also have relatively good progress on intercluster coordination groups, which are critical because this is where the humanitarian programming cycle sits. And so in terms of response, this group also plays a critical role. So here we have 11%. And I'll explain why that is also a reflection of actual cluster leadership, which I'll get to next. And so what we've seen is a relatively good progress in terms of the number of overall intercluster coordination groups where we have local and national actors, which has gone up by 10%, which is good news. And then in terms of overall participation of local and national actors in clusters, we actually see also some modest progress, but it's actually a very solid 51%. Going to the next slide. Now, participation is one thing because that means sitting in the room and being part of discussions. Leadership is something that we see as critical. And there we see pretty steady figures in the sense that they are on the lower scale. So we have, in terms of cluster leadership, and by leadership we mean widely, we mean co-chairmanship, leadership, co-leading a cluster, all of these categories would be counted as leadership. We see that being as a pretty steady, no progress at 37%. Why is leadership critical? Because if you're not leading something, you're less likely to affect the decision making. And that is why it's really critical to have increased leadership from local NGOs and just generally local and national actors, and having them in a decision-making capacity. So this is not just about inviting someone to the table. It's actually giving them, sharing the power, because power in decision-making and leading something also means power in terms of distributing funding, all these particular elements which are critical. And then I'm I think one good thing has been the strategic advisory groups. And we see actually a very high percentage of local and national NGOs being present in those. And they are critical because they lead the strategy of certain countries. Now, we will hear from other participants today on how it is possible to share power. So if somebody has concerns or thinks this is not possible, it is possible, but you need to have an enabling environment. And too many times when I travel to the field, I hear NGOs giving some frequent observations which are critical and which we need to change. So I hear I'm sitting at the table, but I'm not a really meaningful participant. I can speak, but the environment is not enabling. When I was in Haiti, I heard NGOs talk about being pauperized, not being able to afford having transport to the venues where meetings are held, not having basic running costs being covered in projects. And these are all critical because if people cannot run an NGO, you cannot expect them to actually rightfully and equitably participate in decision making. So it is upon us all to actually ensure that that enabling environment is right. And then, of course, there are the heroic efforts of NGOs in these largest emergencies everywhere, but in particular, Haiti, Sudan, Gaza, where we've heard about local actors being such a critical player. If it wasn't for them, there would likely be no response. So it is really upon us to think about if we cannot function without them, how can we not share power with them? We've heard about the examples of NGOs in Sudan being critical parts and having emergency response rooms, which again were instrumental in the beginning of the response and the response as it went on. We also know that in Gaza, international actors are very limited. If it wasn't for those local NGOs, we would not have been able to act. So really, I look forward to hearing about all the positive examples of how this is possible. And of course, when giving this leadership, we need to always be guided by local actors themselves. We know that there are certain contexts where, due to the enabling or not enabling environment, local actors may wish to perhaps have a less visible role. But let them tell us what they want, and let us be the enablers in making this happen. Back to you, Joyce.
Thank you so much, Marina. Maybe let me mention that Marina also sits together with the global cluster coordinators in the intercluster coordination group at the global level, known as the Global Cluster Coordination Group. So it's very important, and we are happy to hear the perspective from a global level, from an intercluster perspective, and to see the progress that we have. Of course, we all agree that there's room for improvement, and this is why we have events like this. But thank you so much, Marina, for sharing. And we will share the slides as well as the recording for those who would like to have a closer look at the statistics that Marina has shared with us. We're now going to hear from an experience with the education cluster in South Sudan. We are very happy to have with us Manuela Tiu, who's the co-coordinator of the education cluster in South Sudan, as well as Ben, who is the localization specialist for the global education cluster, working very closely with all of us. So Ben, I don't know if you want to introduce the video, and then we can have colleagues listen to the video and hear the experience in a different way than listening to us speak for the moment. Over to you, Ben.
Thank you very much, Joyce. And I'll introduce Manuela and allow her to come to share her video and describe what we are seeing shortly. But just before we start that, I also want to take today to launch a guidance document that explains how the global education cluster and the education cluster in South Sudan went through this process of establishing local leadership at the cluster level. So we have a guide which takes us through every step that the cluster team made in South Sudan, the different processes it went through, the decision making it went through, and has the tools and documents associated there. So I will share that here in the chat today, and it's an easy guide for cluster teams to take that on for any cluster and really take local leadership forward in this way. As Marina said, there are many ways that local leadership can be promoted in the cluster, but this is one way we've been able to do it in the education cluster. And I'll just now invite Manuela to the microphone just to introduce her video very quickly.
All right, thank you, Ben. Hello, everyone. My name is Manuela. I'm the National Cluster Co-Coordinator for the Education Cluster and seconded from a national partner called OwnCare. So in terms of the video you're just about to see, it basically documents the cluster leadership that we have in South Sudan. We have 3 cluster co-coordinators, that's from UNICEF, Save the Children, and then OwnCare representing the national organizations. And in terms of in terms of the message, we are looking at what has been the benefit of having the local leadership within the cluster coordination, and then some of the challenges also that we experience within the coordination framework and what can be done better. Over to you, Ben.
Thank you very much, Manuela. And I think we can now watch
Welcome.
the video.
The South Sudan Education Cluster works to assess and respond to acute education in emergency needs and ensures education partners are responding to emergencies and meeting the needs of affected population through a coordinated approach within an agreed framework.
My name is Manuela Tiu. I work as the Education Cluster Co-Coordinator for the National Partners, and I work for OwnCare. OwnCare is a universal network for knowledge and empowerment. We're a national organization operating in South Sudan. We deliver services of primary health care, food security and livelihoods, water, sanitation, hygiene, and education. OwnCare was selected as a national co-coordinating organization of the Education Cluster at the end of 2022. So in terms of the local actors, their role has been very crucial to the education sector, especially within the cluster mechanism. Having interventions being led by the local actors, one is that they are very knowledgeable when it comes to the context, because these are communities they stay with, they come from those particular communities, and that also helps in terms of being able to identify the actual needs within those communities. The other perspective also is in terms of the cost efficiency, because most of the local actors are based within those particular localities, and what that translates into is that it's much more easier to deliver services within those communities. Looking also at the perspective of durable solutions, of course, the local actors, once they're equipped with the ability to deliver services within their communities, this also builds on their capacity, and that provides a much more longer sustainable approach to offering services within those particular communities than having more of international agencies that are not staying longer term within the context of South Sudan. My role can have an important impact on strengthening the connections between the national and subnational levels, and my aim is to bring more focus to what partners are doing on the ground. It's important to have local partners participate in subnational coordination, because this enforces trust within the communities and also ensures collective action or responsibility by the national actors.
In my view, the national organizations are deeply rooted to the communities and basically understand the context and the challenges and the potential solutions. And therefore, their representations at the national cluster by one of their colleagues has an importance in a way that their views, the views of the community and perspective in the programming are represented.
Thank you very much, Ben, and thank you, Manuela. I think we had a bit of challenge hearing Ben, but I hope that we were able to follow the video. So very glad to have those perspectives. We're now going to move into our panel discussion for the day, which is the main part of our webinar. I'm going to start by introducing our speakers. As you will see on the screen, we have Shintoho Andova, who works with Gold Prime Organization Nigeria as a WASH manager and also represents or sits in the Global WASH Cluster Strategic Advisory Group. We are also joined by Manuela Tiyu, who you've already met. We are pleased to be joined by Jessica Jackson, who is a Child Protection Area of Responsibility Coordinator in Northeast Syria. And then last but definitely not least, we have Jean-Jacques Souhene, who is joining us from the Nutrition Cluster in Haiti. We were to have Anna Tazita Samuel join us today, but for unavoidable circumstances, she's not going to be able to join us. But we will have some of her perspectives shared at the end of this panel session. So I'm going to invite the speakers to be available, and we will start the discussion to hear their experiences. We'll start off first with Shintoho, who's based in Northeast Nigeria. And from you, Shintoho, would like to hear your perspective on the importance of co-coordination by local and national actors in coordination mechanisms. Very happy to hear your perspective on this, Shintoho. Over to you.
Sure. Hi, Joyce. Thank you so much. Just to confirm, you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you well. Thank you.
Good, thank you. So my name is Shitohu. Thank you so much for the introduction. I think coordination is a very important part of humanitarian response. I think without coordination, we probably be repeating everything we're doing most likely. But I think it's a bit beyond just having synchronized and impactful aid. It's a very robust system that has been passed together, and we have the core functions. And if you look at it, at the heart of it is contingency planning, preparedness, and capacity strengthening, which localization falls under. If it means if we're able to build resilience, if we're able to build systems, we are working strategic with the little resources that we have. And it means if we have a local partner as part of the coordination team, the cluster lead agency gets to build the capacity of the agency over the time. And if this happens, because this is capacity building is also part of the dimensions for localization. So if we're able to do the knowledge transfer and the skill transfer and also the resource transfer, it means that if in the future they need to respond independently without international organizations, they are able to they are able to maintain the quality and the standards. Yeah, they're definitely going to be faster, but also the quality will be there. This is particularly important for contexts that have that are prone to recurrent disasters, because it might not be possible to activate the formal cluster approach every time. So, but if we have some capacity at the community level, at the country level, then regardless of the skill, somebody is able to respond. I think that is very, very important. So I think Manuela already mentioned in her video, the custom, the understanding of the custom is something that local organizations come with. And I feel for me, something that stands out is they also have the idea of the potential barriers that could hinder delivery of aid. So if we have that knowledge, in the coordination team, it means we are going to be more tailored. We have a more tailored response. And because of that, we're also going to have a lot of trust from the community. So we're going to achieve more. So the other key things that the local organizations bring to the table, they're able to move very fast. For the context of Nigeria, we've seen how quickly national organizations can move, and also how they're able to get to the deep field, to where it's the hardest to reach. So if we have a blend of the strength from the international organization and all the UN organization with the national organization as a co-coordinator, I think it's a very, very it's going to be a very, very good plus for the coordination system that will make it very, very strong. So if it also means national organizations have access. So what I was saying about getting into deep location, if we're able to do this, if a coordination imagine you have a coordinator that is able to go to everywhere in the response, it means you're going to have greater quality assurance as well in the response. So it's a plus. And then lastly, I think when we're talking about accountability as well, having a voice from the coordinator, from the community in form of the co-coordinator from the national partner, means that we're being transparent. It means the community will trust us more. And also, there will be no questions about who these people are, why they're helping us. Maybe they have emotion, they may have a motive behind and all that. And also having somebody from the community, I would say, to be part of the HPC throughout, from the resource mobilization, preparedness through to response and monitoring. It's a huge plus for the community and the humanitarian community as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. We were able to hear you clearly, and you made some very clear points around knowledge and skills transfer, sharing resources, building trust with the community, building trust within the humanitarian space, and most importantly as well, accountability to the affected population and sustainability. So thank you for sharing your thoughts on this. We are now going to hear from Jean-Jacques Suhene, who is co-leading the nutrition cluster in Haiti. We are all very familiar with the situation in Haiti, which is unfortunate, and very happy to hear from a context that is so challenged. So from you, Jean-Jacques, welcome very much. We would like to hear from you around how the nutrition cluster has promoted the co-leadership with local and national authorities, particularly in situations as challenging as Haiti, within the coordination space. And if you have some thoughts around what could be the advantages of having local and national authorities in coordination mechanisms, we would also love to hear those from you. You are most welcome, and over to you.
Thank you, colleagues. Hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think as all the colleagues already talked about the importance of localization, I think there is no more discussion. We have to see how to strengthen this localization in what we are doing and the different perspectives. When it's come to Haiti, in Haiti, the leadership of coordination is taken by the ministry, and the UN agencies are taking the co-leadership. So it's working actually well. Of course, there are some challenges. We are going to talk about them. At national level, the leadership is national level and field level. Leadership is taken by ministry, and the co-leadership are taken by the different organization at the department level. So there are some advantages in that regards. The first one, as we yeah, in the context of Haiti is the appropriation of the coordination and the response that we are providing to the population. What we are experiencing in Haiti, having the leadership done by the ministry, of course, there are some challenges because some of the actors are not well prepared and some other are well prepared, especially those who already spent long time on the position during the ministry. Because when we are having like those coming just recently, they don't have that much experience in terms of coordination. But when we are having these leaders who were already there since a long time, most of the time they already see so many times how clusters were activated and deactivated in the country. So it's an add value to build on this experience already. That is first, and it's really increasing the appropriation and in terms of coordination and response. Secondly, when we are having the national organization taking, the national leaders taking the lead in coordination, it's kind of providing an encouragement to the other local actors to feel confident and to see that they are valued. And this really improve their participation in the different coordination mechanism we are having in the country. And this is making as well easy the capacity building. When the actors are having already some position in leadership, despite what they can have like things or area to be strengthened, when the co-leadership coming from the cluster lead agencies as co-lead or from the IMO, it's really contributing to improve the capacity building and the transfer of the technical skills to the different level. And in the context of Haiti, where we are having really big challenges in terms of access, having this different local organization living in the community, as someone already explained, and as we saw in the video, it's providing an added value in terms of response, in terms of proactivity to offer the response to the community, because these organizations are based in the community. When we are talking about the geographical access, difficulty to access some areas, as they are already there, it's really contributing to offer the response in these areas. But Marina talked about this in her speech. These local organizations, most of the time, are not well equipped. They are not well trained. They don't have enough means. But when it comes to the time of crisis, all the organizations are using this organization to offer the response. So it's a space to see and to work on capacity building of this national organization, because when we are having this kind of situation, especially like what we are having in Haiti, they are the one offering the coordination, they are the one offering the response in the field. Second thing, using this national organization, they are helping us even to do integration, because most of them are having like 2, 3, 4 areas of activities. So working with them, integration is becoming more easy to integrate in the field and in the response itself. And you know, Haiti, as you say, Joyce, we are having this brain from the country because of everything that is going there. But having national leaders in coordination, I'm talking about this period we're having here, all the coordination meetings, all the coordination fora are like normal. People don't feel that we are out because the leadership is taken, but people who are already in the country, and it's become like normal activities. Of course, despite we can no more meet physically, but when the coordination are done with people who are in the country, people who are known to be in the country, it's making some change, and it's bringing another value to the coordination mechanism in the country. In addition, we are using this local organization and partners in the country are really helping us to build this accountability to the affected population, because themselves, they're in the community, they are helping. So it's another value that we are having in Haiti in terms of accountability to the population we are serving, and of course it improves their self-confidence when they see that they are valued and they can be considered. And as Marina said, few months before, people don't feel that they are important because it was considered that some partners are better valued than others. But in terms of response, actually, all the partners are having difficult to access, and all of us, we are using the same people. Another thing that is now to improve, all the different partners, I mean, the biggest organizations that cannot have easy access are using the same local partners. So most of the time they are even overloaded with the work. And this come to strengthen again the idea that we must build their capacity, because by the end of the day, they will be the one staying on the front line when it will be tough for everybody to have access to the areas. So these are a few elements I would like just to share with you on Haiti side, and I will be happy to share with you from the other questions. Over to you, Joyce.
Thank you so much, Jean-Jacques. Very good to hear the experience of Haiti, to hear about how we are working with local and national authorities. When we talk about localization, we do refer to the civil society, but we also refer to how we work with local and national authorities. So good to hear your perspectives. And I want to just highlight one of the things that has come out from what you said that stood out for me, is about valuing each other, understanding who we are as different organizations, what our strengths are, what we all bring to the table, and where we all need support to improve. It's not just local and national organizations or authorities that require capacity strengthening. We all require capacity strengthening to some extent, but we need to understand where the strengths are and where we all need to improve. So thank you for bringing that point about the value that we all need to hold of each other. We are going to hear from Manuela again, who we had from earlier and shared her video. Manuela, from your video, we already saw the positive elements that have come from the co-coordination in the education cluster in South Sudan. I noted from the chat that there was a question from Kalufenyan, I hope I pronounced that correctly, asking about the challenges that may have been encountered in the case study or in the process of co-coordination. So Manuela, would you like to share with us some of the challenges that you may encounter or are encountering as a national co-coordinating partner? And if you have some examples of how you've overcome those, we'd be very happy to hear from you, because we would like to hear about challenges, but more importantly, how do we help each other overcome those challenges? Over to you, Manuela.
Thank you, Joyce, for that introduction. So just very quickly, I would like to also highlight in terms of the current structure that we have, because that also will help to inbuild in terms of some of the key success and also some of the challenges. So just for our understanding, we have 3 coordinators, 1 information management officer, and then at the sub-national level, we have 28 subnational focal points who support with the coordination at the grassroots level. So in terms of the coordination, then we have the bottom-up approach to ensure that we have adequate information in terms of the needs on the ground, which feeds into the national and helps also when it comes to the humanitarian response planning. So, of course, when it comes to the responsibilities, we all work jointly to ensure that we are able to meet the key cluster key functions. And of course, this is also with the close guidance of the lead agencies that Save the Children, UNICEF, but not forgetting that the government role is also very crucial. So looking at also part of our structure as a secretariat, we also have the strategic advisory group where the Ministry of Gender Education and Instruction, commonly known as MOGEI, they're also part and parcel. So that also helps in aligning our strategies to the government. And if you're looking at issues around transitioning, and right now we're talking about the triple nexus, we're also talking at issues around strengthening local capacities. The government is very crucial in terms of engagement. So looking at the key success that we've had is the South Sudan cluster, especially with this leadership arrangement. One has been in terms of the gap filling. I joined the cluster that was pretty much early last year in a situation where the UNICEF and Save the Children coordinators were all transitioning. So in a scenario whereby you have these large gap happening and local capacities have not been strengthened, that means even in terms of response when it comes to humanitarian activities, this will be a very huge gap. So I think having national actors co-lead, that is very crucial. And then also looking at the increased participation of local actors in the humanitarian response plan. From the onset, initially we had a very strict and tight process when it comes to the membership criteria of the local actors, but looking at their participation, how could we increase this? We had to loosen that up in terms of the membership processes. So that also saw an increment in the HRP process in terms of more organizations. And then when it comes to the capacity trainings also, of course, we have the technical and also the cross-cutting issues. So that the technical, for example, we normally have this set of surveys to just help us understand what are the key challenges that partners have in implementation. So if it's EIE, trainings, we've also enabled partners provide that when it comes to issues of standards, especially construction standards. For example, also in terms of the teacher training materials, with support of actors such as UNESCO, NRC, UNICEF, we are able then to provide that support to the partners to ensure that they have quality programming. And then on the cross-cutting, of course, we're looking at issues of GBV, disability inclusion, and then also we are looking at PSEA, because those are also very crucial to ensure that we are safeguarding the rights of the people that we serve. So the other perspective also is in terms of being the voice for the local actors. When we do not have representation as local actors, that becomes very difficult in terms of even raising issues or challenges that we face, maybe in terms of the funding, in terms of the challenges that we face while implementing, because also access constraints are there by the national actors. So all those issues then with my presence within the cluster, the local actors are also able to share this, and it does provide that forum then to discuss with the lead agencies to find better or common grounds where this can be addressed. So coming to the gaps or challenges, as you highlighted earlier, I think one of the key things we've always battled really so much on is on the limited representation at the HCT level, because in as much as we are talking of the cluster secretariat having representation from the local actors right now, but we all understand within the cluster mechanism, key decisions are always undertaken at the HCT level. But the current structure we have is in such a way that our inputs as a secretariat are highlighted in the ICCG meetings. However, at the HCT level, there's also another independent layer in terms of which local actors sit on that table. And for South Sudan, we only have 2 organizations that currently sit at the HCT meetings. So when you compare that vis-a-vis the representation from UN, the INGO, the donors, still it's a small number. So if you're talking of even a consensus on an issue on decision making, that still might have some biases involved. And looking at it also from the technical perspective, the fact that these organizations that are selected to sit at the head city they do not really have the technical knowledge regarding the different clusters. So sometimes if technical issues are also being discussed, they might not be able to explain this in a much more better perspective. And that's why it's important, if there are head city meetings, creating sessions where you have only dedicated cluster coordinators be able to have a seat at the table to now provide the technical insights. That becomes crucial. And initially what would happen is that we were just observers in those meetings. So even in terms of providing input, that was not being helpful really in terms of addressing the actual issue. So I think that has been one of the core challenges that we've seen. And then when it comes to the coordinator position, because this is more or less like a voluntary support that this organization is offering through the focal person that has been seconded. So you find they struggle with finances to be able to support this role. So in most cases, you find maybe the coordinator, even after a short while, might be forced to leave the coordination role simply because the organization cannot support this. So financing for the co-coordinator has been a key issue in some of the sectors. So looking at solutions, I think through the support of the cluster lead agencies, and that is where it's very crucial to really have the support or the buy-in of localization by the lead agencies. We've had Save the Children for the context of South Sudan be able to lobby for financing for the co-coordinator position. So through their efforts, that then has been able to sustain the role. But again, we need to look for more sustainable solutions. And then looking at also the information management officer role, like currently we do have a gap as a cluster. And of course, that's the primary mandate, for example, for UNICEF. So also as a cluster, what we are looking towards to, how can we also localize the information management role? So that also has put a lot of, thoughts into the table. But again, through the cluster lead agencies, we are trying to see whether we can be able to get bilateral financing in terms of smaller amounts, but then having a roving information management officer that then can be able to support and meet that existing gap that we currently have. So those are just some of the few issues or concerns I can put across. Over. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Manuela. It's important to remind ourselves that this is a journey. Nothing is smooth. We are making progress, but we also face some challenges. So very good to hear about those challenges. One thing that I can say that stuck out for me is about making sure that national and local actors also have a seat at the decision-making table. And it's not just the seat to sit, but the seat to have a voice. And I think that's very important to have at the humanitarian country team level, at the decision-making level, which is where the strategic decisions are made. Participants, I would like to say that for some colleagues, they are in the field and have poor internet, so we apologize for those who may not be able to turn off their videos. That's why we have their photos in front of you, so please bear with us because we would like to hear from them. And so we are going to move on to our next speaker, who's Jessica. Jessica is our Child Protection Area Responsibility Coordinator in Northeast Syria. And Jessica, we've heard from national actors, we've heard about national and local authorities, but we'd like to hear from you what your thoughts are around what international actors can do to promote leadership of national and local actors in co-coordination. What is feasible, what is doable, and how do we promote this? Over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Joyce. So let me first give a quick overview of how the coordination is in Northeast Syria. The structure is a bit unique from many other contexts, and where in Northeast Syria, the coordination is under the Next Forum NGO. So most of the coordination most of the coordinators are hosted by different international NGOs, and we do not have, we are yet to get to an area where we have co-coordinators as from local actors, but this is something that we are slowly building on. So I'll just give an example or share experience from Northeast Syria, what we're currently doing. We are in the early phases, but it's worth sharing what we are doing currently. So I think the first step that we are focusing on is capacity and institutional strengthening, meaning that we're not only focusing on technical capacity, because we do believe over the years that the local NGOs have already received adequate technical capacity on different issues, but there has been an area where it's been forgotten, meaning that institutional capacity building or capacity strengthening. So ensuring that these actors, the local actors, are institutionally strengthened, but also the skills and knowledge that they acquire, they are able to put them into practice so that we see a scale up of services overall in coordination, or them having the opportunity to be co-coordinators in the near future. Not only that, we're also trying to promote equitable and meaningful partnership. This can simply mean that we are introducing translation in meetings where most of the local actors do speak the national language here as Arabic. So to ensure that they are participating in the meetings adequately and there is proper engagement also from the local actors, is to include translations in our meetings, but also the documents that we are producing as the coordination, the CPOR is the documents are also translated to the Arabic language, so that also the local actors can have inputs on the documents, can review the documents and share their thoughts and ideas and strategies on how we can further build our the coordination in Northeast Syria. Not only that, we're also looking at decision making, meaning that we're involving the local actors in having a seat at the strategic advisory group, ensuring that they're sharing their ideas, their inputs from in the strategic advisory group, and also carrying the contributions from local actors and bringing them into the strategic advisory group to see how we can better improve or how we can better support local actors through the coordination. Not only that, we are also looking at creating a platform either during our monthly meetings to ensure that the local actors have an opportunity to share the best practices that they have been doing in the projects that they implement, or even lessons learned that they've had over the years. This only creates visibility for them, meaning that we are showcasing the work of the local actors in the field, and also giving them an opportunity that in the next 1 or 2 or 3 months, they're able to step into a co-coordination role and drive the meetings or drive ideas or drive the strategy of the working group. Lastly, but not, lastly from my end, I would say it's funding. In Northeast Syria, as I said, it's very unique in terms of how the structure is. Each coordinator or AoR is independent, meaning that they're not binded by any organization. If we are promoting if we want to promote local actors to also take up the co-coordination responsibility, we have to ensure that they are funded adequately so that they can take up this. They have independent staff who can lead the co-coordination. So they need funding for this, to have independent staff who can sit in the coordination and not be attached to any organization. This is only because of the security challenges in Syria and the visibility encouraged for coordinators to be independent and impartial. And if we want to have local actors sit in that, we should also ensure that they are funded so that they can have an independent person who is focusing only on coordination work and improving the work of the coordination, and also bringing in the voices of local actors into the coordination. That's it from my side. Over to you, Joyce.
Thank you so much, Jessica. And there is a lot that that international actors can do. in supporting national and local actors in co-coordination in leadership. I think what's important to emphasize here is that we need to encourage principled partnerships, which means that we are not just talking about risk transfer to national organizations or asking them to be implementing partners or, subcontractors. There is a lot more in the way that we partner. There's a lot of room for improvement in the way that we partner, sharing resources a lot more equitably, knowledge and skills transfer, which was mentioned earlier by Shintoho. So thank you very much for that overview. Now, colleagues, as I mentioned earlier, we had hoped that Anatazita Samuel would be able to join us today, but unfortunately, due to unavoidable circumstances, she won't be joining us today. So we are going to hear from her anyway, but in a recorded version. And Anatazita is the Executive Director for Women for Change in South Sudan, which also co-coordinates the GBV area of responsibility in South Sudan. So we are going to share with you some insights from Anatazita from something that was recorded previously, and we hope it will be as insightful as the panelists who've spoken so far. So Isaac, over to you for the video. Thank you.
Have their Women for Change is a women's rights and women-led organization in South Sudan with the main mandate to advocate and empower women through economic empowerment and entrepreneurship. Women for Change operates in South Sudan, in Central Equatoria State, Eastern Equatoria State, Western Barakazal, and in Warab State, where this project of co-leading the GBV subcluster, we are taking the lead in.
We were opportune to get a project to work with a women-led organization, and a lot of work was done around its identification in support with the GBV area of responsibility in South Sudan, identifying their gaps, building their capacity, on the gaps that are identified, like that on-job mentorship and coaching, especially in coordinating the GBV work.
Women-led organizations need to be involved in GBV subcluster to have their voices heard. It will also enable this women-led organization to have better coordination mechanism of working in our societies. For example, we are able to lead the 16 days of activism in Warab State, where we coordinated with different stakeholders and it became a colorful event.
My role is to coordinate with the GBV working group partners. I co-chair the meeting in that position. The impact on me is actually like I'm exposed now globally or even regionally. This means that the knowledge that I acquired, like I have the coordination skill whereby I can easily coordinate with the GBV actors. I also have the skill on resources mobilization, of which if women are actually eager to have that chance to get this knowledge, I can be able to help them. I have the communication skill as I speak now, and by then it was not easy, but because I have worked, of course, with the women-led organization, I begin to have the skills.
Clusters brings very many actors, so having women-led organization in the GBV coordination enables them to network and connect with donors, NGOs, UN agencies who might be interested in supporting their activities, especially when it comes to GBV programming. One thing that we have learned is how to work with the partners of different calibers. We have also learned that women can do leadership role in coordination very effectively. We used to believe that coordination is only for international agents or for men, but with the few months that we have done this project, we already have the courage that I can also sit in the high table and give my views and they are taken. One recommendation I will say is women-led organization should be given the space to be in leadership, and that should be supported with the co-funding or full funding. Most of the INGOs, the UN agents and the donors have signed the grant bargain, and in that there is also a section of the support to women-led organization. I could like to see that.
Thank you so much, Isaac. I think we've had the insights from Anatazita around how national and local organizations are engaging with in co-coordination in South Sudan within the GBV AoR, and it's great to hear some of those perspectives. We've had some questions on the chat, and now we are going to open the session on Q&A, so to hear from you on some questions that you may have relating to the session today, relating to localization, if you want to hear more about co-coordination. So I will pick some questions from the chat that I think a few of them have been answered on the chat, but I think there is one that was raised around the flagship initiative by the Emergency Relief Coordinator. Marina, I don't know if you are able to speak on this from intercluster perspective, and also we have colleagues who are in South Sudan, because the question is specifically around the impact of the flagship initiative on coordination in South Sudan, if people are able to speak about it. I don't know if Marina, you would like to say something, and then we'll move on to other questions. Over to you. And please, colleagues in South Sudan, if you have something to add, please feel free to do so on the chat. Thank you.
Thanks, Joyce. I'm very happy to just say that, of course, the flagship initiative has thrown up localization as one of the key issues, and there is a need for things which are much more bottom-up. And I think there are initiatives in South Sudan on how to do that, including looking at sort of plans that focus on certain geographic areas. So looking at how do you also engage local actors more. But honestly, rather than me speak on an initiative that is being run by OCHA, I think it would be much better if we heard from colleagues from South Sudan speak of what their experience has been and what do they see as moving. Oh, back to you, Joyce.
Thank you very much, Marina. I'm opening the floor to anybody who would like to come in. Gloria, if you would like to come in, I see your hand is up, and please introduce yourself. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joyce. My name is Gloria Soma. I'm the Executive Director of the TT Foundation, and I'm glad that we were actually part and parcel of the people that launched this flagship initiative last year. Nonetheless, I mean, on paper, the flagship initiative is quite clear, eloquent, with some good wish lists. But on the ground, I think the first round of consultations were conducted in WOW earlier in the year. But it comes back because for me, the questions remain. We want it to be a bottom-up approach. Well, even in the way the consultations are being conducted, it is still the old sense of a top-bottom approach kind of scenario. So when are we actually leaving room for communities to be able to make decisions, decide and tell us what to do and how to do it? Is not coming out very clear there. And I think, well, the interest of the initiative was, to have this bottom-up approach and taking, affected people's opinions into consideration for, to hopefully better the humanitarian action and effectiveness in country. So to a greater extent, I think we have good work in paper, but in terms of action, there's a lot yet to be done. Over to you.
Thank you, Gloria. Very good to have your feedback. Manuela, over to you.
Thanks, Joyce. So maybe just to provide a follow-up, but from the cluster perspective, we recently had the same sentiment across all the South Sudan clusters, because the approach is looking at accountability to affected people. And what has happened is that OCHA has linked this to what they refer to as the area-based approach, the area-based leadership. So they have these 3 locations where the flagship is being conducted. They get the feedback from the communities and then inform partners and also try to, fundraise along that. But the issue has been how engaged have the clusters been? And then you hardly hear of at what point do local actors, cannot avoid bringing in the question around organizations being involved. And that means we need to also hear the local representation in terms of the CBOs, the national organizations. But to that extent, that never came out clearly from the different engagements we had as a cluster with OCHA. So I think they also acknowledged that as a very huge gap. And I think it's something that they are looking to work towards in terms of how engaging it can be with all the stakeholders and not limited to only the key contacts that are leading this particular initiative.
Thank you very much, Manuela and Gloria, for those candid reflections and linking to how paper to action, and also on the relationship with coordination, because this is what will also make a difference in these initiatives and how they're implemented. So thank you for those candid reflections. And thank you, Michael Hayden, for raising the question. We have a question, one of the questions on the chat, which asks, has there been a localization strategy or roadmap developed either in South Sudan, Syria, or Haiti that is endorsed by the HCT? So maybe we can hear from colleagues in South Sudan, in Syria, in Haiti, if there is a localization strategy or roadmap that has been endorsed by the HCT. For it to be endorsed by the HCT, it should really be at the inter-cluster level. So maybe to hear some experiences from different contexts. And if there are people or colleagues on the call who have had this experience, feel free to share on the chat or to raise your hand. Gloria, I see your hand is up. Over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Joyce. Once again, well, on the localization and HCT endorsement, I think I have been privileged to participate with the former HC at country level and a few colleagues from the South Sudan NGO Forum and a couple of donors and UN agencies and international organizations at country level to develop actually a localization strategy for South Sudan. With lots of beautiful, as I still say, and nice paperwork, but then it all falls back down to implementation if you're able to see results at the end of the day. It's been there for the last almost now 2 years, but then the action around it has been very slow because in most cases, people will only choose what befits them at a particular point in time. That's the unfortunate part. It's not that we want to, accommodate all the recommendations in the paper in most cases. And this is what we've been seeing over the last couple of months, I would say, since we developed the strategy. And then I think I will link that also up with the other question on the involvement of the NGO Forum in, advancing the localization agenda, because I've seen it also on the chat. Well, having sat in the steering committee of the NGO Forum for the last almost 6 years, the NGO Forum, I would say, has been successful to some certain extent in advancing this conversation, because almost 6 years ago, we were not part and parcel of the, coordination mechanism at country level, whether it is on the advisory board, whether it's on the HCT, whether it's on the, what they used to call the ICCG. We were not there as local representatives, but the NGO Forum has been able to, push over the years for positions of representation of national actors actually within this, within the humanitarian coordination framework in the country. And today we have up to 2 representatives of local actors on the advisory board of the food funds, on the HCT, and also on the ICCG. And we've been able to also advance that conversation even to cluster levels. I'm proud to see Manuela today on this conversation because she's one of our baby products at the foundation, who started from the food security cluster when the conversation about co-coordination leadership for local actors began. And so I'm proud also to, and a big congratulations to the education cluster that they've been able to step up and be among, some of the few clusters that, are taking up the question on co-coordination roles really positively and in action in the context of South Sudan. Over to you, Joyce.
Thank you so much, Gloria. Marina, you want to come in on this? Thank you.
Well, I don't want to, I'm sure there's other people who wish to speak, but I would just say, just from a global perspective, there are different contexts which have developed different papers. So I think one is to recognize there is a whole multitude of different types of documents. Some are strategies, localization strategies by either local or mixed NGO forums. Some are HCT endorsed strategies, some are vision papers, some are roadmaps. So we have a whole gamut of different types of plans. And as Gloria said, I mean, the plan is only as good as the piece of paper it's written on. It's the actual action that counts. So the question is really, how do things advance, and how much is that plan or vision or whatever it is really owned by all actors, local and national actors, international organizations, everyone who actually has a role to play, donors and so on. And so I think there is no simple answer. I would just say there's lots of different types of documents, and they play different roles, and they're produced by different actors. And I think the collective action or the collectivity of the action will depend on how and where it's owned. And the critical, I think, success factor, and hopefully Gloria will agree with me on this, is that it's really owned by all, because when you do have that joint ownership, you're just much more likely to move forward, because it does take that whole global village of different actors to move efforts on localization. Back to you, Joyce.
Thanks, Marina. Before I bring in Jessica, I just wanted to say that, yes, it's important, and I agree that we all need to own it. But I think we also need drivers of implementation. One thing that's coming out clearly from this Q&A session is that we may have things in writing, we may all agree, we may come to consensus, but what does it mean when we have to take things forward? And I know some of the challenges relate particularly relating, I'll come to funding. So how do we move those things forward? Do we have some steps in relation to pooled funding, but how do we move from pen to action? So agreeing with you, Marina, but also highlighting the need to take action forward. Jessica, if you want to come in lastly on this, and then maybe we can look at some other comments on the chat as well as questions that may not have been addressed. Over to you. Thanks.
Thanks, Joyce. So just to briefly share example from Northwest here, we're in the early phases of this. What we do have is a localization action plan that we worked very closely, meaning that the local actors, the Child Protection AoR, also work very closely with the global localization specialists to develop something that is meaningful and is implementable in the context of Northwest Syria. So what we have in our action plan, I would say, is ideas and opinions from local actors on how they would want localization to take place in the context of Northwest Syria. Is it effective? We'll only be able to say that maybe towards the end of the year, because we're in the early stages of it. But so far, at the current moment, there are few steps that we've taken ahead, and I think, despite it being in a document and being in a document, it's a document that was developed by the local actors. So they're also following and interested in knowing how localization will take place in Northwest Syria. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you, Jessica, and that highlights Marina's point as well. Thank you for emphasizing that. I'm going to quickly make some comments based on comments on the chat. So we've had Camelia on the chat talking about the situation in Lebanon and how it's been challenging to have national and local actors recognized and embraced within the humanitarian response. Camelia, I've mentioned to you that if you do need support in relation to this area, on how this we can support in this area, please feel free to reach out to us. We will share some contact details at the end. If you are in touch with any of the clusters at the global level, they would be happy to support, but happy to provide some guidance, because I think there is a lot out there on how things are moving forward in other contexts. I know that Lebanon is a challenging and unique context in different ways, but I think there are ways in which we can push for more principal partnerships, the recognition of national and local actors, and strengthening their capacities in areas that have been identified and agreed on with them. I want to also recognize a comment that's been put in by Amina about the fact that in order to have effective local co-leadership, we need to shift in the way that we do things. So there has to be a ceding of power to some extent, sharing of resources, sharing of power, and acknowledging the barriers that national and local actors face, but also helping to address some of those barriers. I think we have managed to answer and respond to all the questions on the chat and the Q&A. I don't know if there's any question that's been missed, that's not been responded to. If there is, please, the floor is open. We have 5 minutes left for the Q&A session. If anybody would like to come in, or if you'd like to make a comment, that's also welcome. Camelia, you have the floor. Ahlan wa sahlan. Camelia, if you're speaking, you're on mute. I see your hand, but you're still on mute. We cannot hear you yet. Okay.
Yes. Hi,
Please go
everyone.
ahead.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm Camila Safatli, the Grants Program Manager at a community-based grassroots organization in northern Lebanon named Alawite Islamic Charity Association. Thank you so much for this opportunity, and we look forward to such platforms like this and opportunities to voice out the challenges. I would really like to address one thing that's affecting us in a big, intensely. We need to have the power to say no when the intervention that's suggested to be implemented in our area does not reflect the context. Unfortunately, we have many examples of projects that were designed outside Lebanon and they are asked to be implemented in the region. When we say no, we simply lose the fund rather than they taking our perspective to tailor the intervention to be adapted for the real context. So the power of losing the fund is putting many local actors who are really active actors and the risk of not being sustained just because we refuse to implement something that does not mirror the need and mirror the design that should be implemented. Thank you again for this opportunity, and we really look forward things to be changing in the very near future, because unfortunately, we're not being very able to sustain our support and our services. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Camelia. And I think you bring up a point which is around, even if we talk about sharing of resources, more direct funding to national and local organizations, how is that funding being decided in the first place on what it will go to? You can decide on funds and what it will go to. And then when we look at the needs on the ground, that, as you said, the funding or the requirements do not mirror the needs on the ground. So a very important thing to start from the beginning and not only to already decide this is what it's going to do without determining or looking at the needs within the country. Francis Tabu, I see your hand up. We'll unmute you and then you can have the chance to speak to us before we go to the last session. Over to you. Thank you.
Hello, can you hear me? Sorry, it took longer to unmute. Thanks so much, Joyce. And
please go ahead.
Thank you so much, colleagues. Big thanks to Joyce, Benson, and the colleagues. I've spoken with some of you earlier. I'm the consultant for the Global Health Cluster, trying to come up with a localization strategy as well. So this is very helpful for us in terms of learning the different experiences that can also inform the upcoming plan that we're working on. My question specifically goes back to one of the remarks from the earlier speaker, referring to some of the advantages and the experiences of working with local actors. And the key point here is the perceived benefits of local actors into deep field presence. And I want to bring back the issue, especially around context with active ongoing armed conflicts, where we do not seem to necessarily see that that benefit. At least, the local actors, the ones bearing the brunt of all the hostilities, the atrocities. And if you look at the global state statistics, the local actors, or at least local staff, are the ones that are really taking the brunt of this. And it brings into focus the questions around risk management, risk assessment, and how we share risk and not transfer risk onto local partners. So I would have loved to hear with more field-based practical experiences in terms of how have we worked with the partners through the clusters to mitigate this risk and not rather force the NGOs, the local actors indirectly, because the fact that international actors cannot access those field sites becomes an indirect opportunity that the local actors are trying to fill in the gap, recognizing that because of so many barriers, that's the only opportunity for them to get funding. So the question is, are they going there because indeed they bring in key advantages over their international counterparts, or they're actually going there because of the opportunity that this kind of context present, and because of the barriers that we've created, and they find themselves relegated to those areas. So that's it really from my end. Thanks. It would be good to hear on the aspects on risk sharing. Thank you.
Thank you, Francis. I think that this is a very valid point, a point that's been running for a very long time, that's not been easily addressed. I want to say that we have talked about principal partnerships, just making sure that we are not just doing risk transfer, but risk sharing. And if we are talking about the national and local actors having the opportunity to work more closely with the affected population to have better access, what are we doing as international and local actors to ensure the life and well-being of the national and local actors who end up taking some of this risk? So I think that is a component that needs to go into principal partnerships. You just don't look at, supporting your office equipment, supporting your HR, but you also look at security and safety and well-being of national and local actors. I'm not for 1 minute pretending that it's easy, but I think it's something that we all recognize that we could all be doing better on. As we are running out of time, I'm going to ask any other speakers who spoke today or participants who may have something to add on what Francis has said on the chat. And now, participants, I'm very sorry, but I'm going to invite Gloria to share with us the last remarks. Gloria, we've slightly run out of time, so I'll give you 1.5 minutes to speak with us before I close the session. Over to you, Gloria. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joyce. Well, we all need to acknowledge that local actors contribute significantly to the relevance of the humanitarian response through their proximity to disaster-affected communities, their understanding of culture, language, and their sensitivity to the political and social dynamic. The involvement and participation in all aspects of the humanitarian cycle is essential for accountability to affected populations and ensuring that assistance and protection is relevant. Hence, we need to all redouble our efforts to developing and supporting a long-term partnership and building capacity of the local actors and resilience, and ensuring that the humanitarian coordination system is very intentional in being accessible to national actors' participation. The call for local actors' participation in coordination mechanisms is long overdue, and let's stop clinging on to power and start sharing it with local actors. Let's stop with the negative competition and start working actually on a concrete, actionable, transitional plans for local actors to take lead in these spaces. We all have a responsibility to ensure power is equally shared with local actors in order for us to achieve an efficient and effective humanitarian action. Thank you, and over to you, Joyce.
Thank you so much, Gloria. Well said. A call for action, an inspiration call for action. Before we close, I want to say a big thank you to all our interpreters who joined us today and the company and the support behind it. Thank you very much. I hope we did not make it a difficult job for you. I also want to thank a few people who worked in the background who you've not seen today. If I don't mention anybody by mistake, please forgive me. Ben, Dennis, Ruth, Julie, Brioni, a few colleagues who supported us, Isaac and Shabib. Thank you very much for making this happen. And we are very pleased to have hosted this session. Please feel free to reach out to the global cluster coordination teams that have been on this call today in case you need any information or resources. Have a good day, a good evening, a good night for those whose day is ending. Thank you very much, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Joyce, for anchoring.